using a currency that cannot store the value of your labor is not an economic choice. It is a slave contract that mortgages your life to the state.
That's a chilling way to start. But if you really dig into the history of money, really look at it, it is the only conclusion you can draw.
Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. That was heavy. Usually we ease into things, but today we're going straight for the jugular.
We are.
We're digging into the legal and philosophical legitimacy of the assets everyone holds. And to do that, we're going all the way back to 1696.
Right. And I know what you're thinking.
1696. Why do I care about 17th century England?
Because the blueprint for Bitcoin, and really the blueprint for the entire modern global economy, it wasn't written in 2008. It was written during a crisis in London over 300 years ago. We are talking about John Locke.
The philosopher. The life, liberty, and property guy.
The very same. But for our purposes, he's the 13th guardian. He was the man who stood between the British Empire and, well, total economic collapse. And the argument he made is the exact same one Bitcoin makes today.
So the premise here, and I want to get this right because it sounds radical, is that money isn't just for buying coffee.
No.
It's the crystallization of labor.
Exactly. Think about it. When you work, you trade your time, your life, your energy for money. If the state then debases that currency, if they water it down, they aren't just making your groceries more expensive.
They're stealing from your path.
They are retroactively seizing the hours you already worked. It is a theft of time.
Okay, let's set the scene. 1695, England is a mess.
Mess is an understatement. It's an existential crisis. They've just had the Glorious Revolution. They're fighting a massive war against France. The treasury is completely empty. But the real problem isn't the war. It's the coins themselves.
The clipping epidemic, and this is just such a human part of the story. The coins were hammered back then, right? They weren't perfect circles.
Right, irregular edges. So you'd get a coin, take a little pair of shears, and you just clip a tiny sliver of silver off the edge.
And then pass the coin on at full value.
And pass it on. You melt down the clippings, sell the silver, and make a profit.
And this wasn't just some criminal underground thing.
Oh, no. It was everyone. Shopkeepers, priests, your grandmother. It was a national pastime. If you weren't clipping, you were the sucker.
Because the coin you just got was already clipped by the person before you.
It was a race to the bottom. So in 1695, the Treasury finally decides to investigate just how bad things have gotten.
And this audit, it produces one of the most terrifying data points in financial history.
It really does.
I have the numbers here. They took 572 bags of silver coins from tax collections. By law, based on face value, they should have weighed 221,418 ounces.
And when they put them on the scale?
They weighed 113,771 ounces.
Just let that sink in.
It's basically half.
The currency was circulating at 51% of its expected weight. Almost half the wealth of the nation's currency had physically evaporated.
So wait, pause there. How does an economy even function? Why didn't people just stop taking the coins?
They were starting to. That was the lethal blow. Foreign merchants, they're not stupid. They start refusing English silver. Domestically, prices just skyrocket.
You need twice as many coins to buy anything.
International credit collapses. The guinea, which is the gold coin, shoots up from 21 shillings to 30 shillings almost overnight. The country is bleeding out.
So this is the crossroads. The government has to do something. And honestly, looking at the options, one seems pretty obvious.
Well, let's introduce the contenders. In one corner, you have William Lowndes. He's the Secretary of the Treasury.
Okay, so Lowndes sees the mess. Coins are 50% lighter. And he basically says, look, the damage is done. The silver is gone. Let's just be pragmatic.
His idea was to raise the face value of the coins by 20%. Basically just devalue the currency officially. Say that a lighter coin is now worth a shilling because the king says so.
And playing devil's advocate for a second, that makes a certain kind of sense. The silver's gone. Why cause a huge panic? Just adjust the books to match reality.
It's the path of least resistance, isn't it? And Lowndes, he is the ghost of modern central bankers. His entire argument is that the value comes from the state stamp, from the decree.
Which is quantitative easing. It's stimulus. It's the world we live in now.
It is. But standing in his way was John Locke. And Locke saw something else. He argued that if you do this, you're not just adjusting a spreadsheet. You are committing a plain cheat.
He did not mince words. A plain cheat.
Not at all. Locke made this radical claim. He said, an ounce of silver is always equal to an ounce of silver.
Which sounds obvious, like saying A equals A. Why was that so controversial?
Because Locke was arguing that money is a weight and measure. It's a ruler, A foot is 12 inches. If the government suddenly says a foot is now 10 inches because we're short on wood, they haven't made anything bigger.
They've just lied about the measurement.
Exactly. They've broken the contract. Think about it. If I lend you money and the government steps in and says you can pay me back with lighter coins that have the same name, the government has helped you steal from me.
They've used the law to seize property from creditors to benefit debtors.
Yes. And for Locke, this wasn't an economic debate. It was about the social contract. And that takes us to his second treatise. You have to understand the philosophical architecture here.
Okay, let's unpack that, because I really want to understand why honest money matters so much if it causes a depression, which we'll get to that.
It all starts with self-ownership. You own your body. You own your person. The king does not own you.
Okay, check.
Step 2 is labor. When you take your body and your time and you mix it with something in nature, let's say you go out and gather acorns, that act of labor makes those acorns yours. It's the bridge from the natural world to private property.
I put in the work, so I own the result.
Precisely. But then you hit a problem. Locke called it the spoilage limitation.
The rotting apple problem.
The rotting apple problem.
Right.
You can't gather 1 million acorns for your retirement because they'll rot. Your labor will have been wasted.
So you need a way to store that effort, that value.
And that is the invention of money. Money is the technology that solves spoilage. It lets you convert your perishable labor, those rotting apples, into an immortal form. Gold and silver don't rot.
That's a powerful image. Money is a battery for your time.
It is, and this is why Locke was so furious. If the state steps in with debasement or inflation, they are rotting your apples after you've already stored them.
That is a genuinely terrifying way to put it.
It's the theft of past labor. If you work 10 hours for a coin, and the state, like Lowndes wanted to, devalues that coin by half, they have retroactively enslaved you for 5 of those hours.
You worked for free?
Work for free. And Locke knew that this violates the entire reason we form societies.
So Locke wins the argument. Parliament says no to Lowndes. They decide to recoin everything at the old full standard. But, having the right philosophy is one thing. How do you enforce it?
Right. You need a technology to actually stop the clipping.
And so they bring in the heavy artillery, Isaac Newton.
The Isaac Newton. People forget he was the master of the mint. And he took this job so seriously. I mean, he was personally hunting down counterfeiters, interrogating them in the Tower of London.
Can you imagine being interrogated by the guy who discovered gravity?
Terrifying. But his real contribution was a piece of technology. The milled edge.
The little grooves on the side of a coin, like on a quarter today?
Exactly. We take it for granted, but this was revolutionary. It was the first physical encryption. If the edge has grooves or text, you can't clip it without everyone knowing immediately.
So he's using physics to enforce honesty.
He is, but there's a flaw in all physical systems. Matter wears down. Entropy. And more importantly, humans get clever. Counterfeiters just made new molds to fake the milling.
The system relied on a physical substance, which can always be corrupted.
And that's the jump to the 21st century, the evolution from the milled edged to SHA 256.
Okay, SHA 256, break that down for someone who isn't a coder.
Think of it this way. Newton used a machine to stamp physical grooves into metal to prove a coin was real. Bitcoin uses math and energy to stamp a valid block of transactions onto the blockchain.
So instead of a physical edge, it's a digital wall.
It's a cryptographic enforcer. In 1696, the security of your money depended on the king's men catching a counterfeiter. With Bitcoin, the security depends on the laws of thermodynamics.
Thermodynamics.
To hack the network, to fake a transaction, you have to expend a truly massive amount of real-world energy. It's called proof of work. It makes cheating so expensive, it's basically impossible. And the rules, like the supply cap, are immutable.
The 21 million cap.
Exactly. There will only ever be 21 million. There's no Lowndes to argue for a change. There's no parliament to vote on it. The code is the law.
So Locke's dream of a ruler that never changes length is finally real. Not in silver, but in code.
It's the perfection of the idea.
But let's go back to 1696. Because sticking to your principles is one thing. When they actually did this, when they followed Locke's plan, it was a disaster in the short term, wasn't it?
Agonizing. We have to be honest about the data. The money supply contracted from about 26 million pounds to 17 million in 6 months.
That is a brutal deflationary shock. Prices must have collapsed.
Unemployment spiked. There were riots. Trade ground to a halt. If you were living through it, you would have hated John Locke. You would have been begging for Lowndes' plan.
So, was it worth it?
That is the ultimate question. And the answer is in what happened next. This is what we call the geometry of hegemony.
Okay, explain that, because it sounds like they just wrecked their economy over a philosophical point.
It was short-term pain for long-term hegemony. By refusing to debase, England proved to the entire world that its money was honest, that a pound sterling was actually a pound of sterling silver.
And that creates trust.
Trust is invisible capital, and this is where the Lindy effect comes in.
Yeah.
The longer something survives, the longer it's expected to survive. The pound became the global standard for trust because it survived that crisis.
And that has to affect borrowing costs.
Massively. Before this, rates were high. After Locke's victory, interest rates dropped by 350 basis points.
A 3.5% drop, that's almost free money.
It changed world history. The British consul yield, their main government bond, anchored at 3% for a century.
So while every other country is devaluing and paying huge interest,
Britain is borrowing cheaply to build the Royal Navy, to fund the Industrial Revolution, to build an empire. Their financial integrity was a more lethal weapon than their cannons.
that is just fascinating. The entire British Empire was built on the back of refusing to lie about the silver content in their pocket change.
That is the lesson. Honest money is a strategic asset of the highest order.
So let's bring this to today. We're living in a world that feels very pre-1696. We have the debt, we have the wars.
In many ways, we've institutionalized the Lowndes philosophy. It's official policy now.
You're talking about the 2% inflation target.
Exactly. Through a Lockean lens, that 2% target is a confession. The central banks are telling you openly, we plan to steal 2% of your stored labor, your saved time, every single year.
And we just accept it. We call it healthy.
It's a permanent breach of the social contract. It's a modern Corvée system.
Corvée, that's feudalism, right? Unpaid labor for the Lord.
Yes, inflation is the modern Corvée. Your wealth is silently siphoned away to fund the state's debts and priorities. You are working for the state a little bit every day, whether you realize it or not.
And unlike 1696, there is no John Locke in the Treasury making the counterargument.
No, the system is designed to debase, which is why we talk about the need for an arc of scarcity, a vehicle to escape the flood.
So we've covered the history, the philosophy, the tech. For the person listening right now looking at their savings account, what's the strategic conclusion?
The conclusion is that you have to recognize the game being played. You cannot store your life's energy in a vessel that is designed to leak. You need a container that is thermodynamically sealed.
The 13th Guardian, John Locke, said, "An ounce of silver is always equal to an ounce of silver." And today, that warning echoes.
It really does.
1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin, just as an ounce of silver was an ounce of silver. The math does not care about politics. It doesn't care about bailouts or elections.
It's the only asset where the supply cap is an immutable law, not a policy suggestion.
To protect your future, you must take back your sovereignty from the whims of the state. Your labor must not evaporate.
It is time to stop the clipping.
That's our deep dive. We'll see you on the next one. Keep building.